KRIS, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, the universe worked in amazing ways to get you here, so, you know, all of us are so excited. And I started following you a couple of years ago, and when you first had your documentary, Crazy Sexy Cancer, I was like, what? That was brilliant marketing. And it was 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, 11 years now.
11 years? Mm-hmm. And so how are you feeling? How are things going?
Things are great. You know, just for people who don't know, when I was diagnosed 11 years ago, I was given 10 years to live. So it's actually been such a journey, and I live with cancer. I've been living with it for, as I said, 11 years. It's incurable, it's inoperable, and it's actually slow moving, so I've been very fortunate. And my disease has actually been doing very, very well. It started to regress a bit. And I just love traveling around and teaching people about healthy living, which I had to learn when I had my wake-up call.
I know. Well, tell us more about that, because you were not living such a healthy lifestyle.
No, like anybody, you know. Yeah. I think that sometimes folks are fortunate and they find healthy living because, you know, they want to feel better, they love feeling good, and they choose that. Most of us don't choose that. We choose feeling crappy.
Right, the easy way.
The easy way. And when I was diagnosed, I was pretty young. I was 31, so I figured I'd be taking care of myself later.
Yeah.
You know, I would get stuff together later. I was really just focused on my career and, you know, trying to build my life. But the universe had something different in mind, and that's when I got sick. And the first thing I did was, after, you know, hearing that there was nothing I could do, I went to Whole Foods Market.
Did someone tell you that? Did you just innately know?
I just thought
that little voice.
Eat vegetables. That's probably a first step. And I went to Whole Foods Market, and then I started to teach myself how to cook. I've always been creative. I spent a lot of time as a performer, and I decided I'd make a documentary about my story because there wasn't anything out there for young people like me who, you know, hadn't been through their first divorce, hadn't had kids, hadn't really had launched their career, and were really kind of just getting started.
Yeah.
And there certainly wasn't anything that had an irreverent tone.
Which was great. That's what
depressing.
I loved. Yes, yes.
So I threw myself into that project and into my wellness, and that's when it started. And who knew that it would take me to Sun Valley?
Right, exactly. Well, and you know, throughout your life, as you were talking about, you were in performance before, you didn't quite know that this was going to be this kind of performance, and talking to thousands of people and really sharing your story and getting their wellness, you know. What is your nutrition today? How different is it? And what would you say to someone who's just possibly been diagnosed?
Yeah, and that's with anything, whether it be chronic disease or any kind of chronic disease, cancer, or anybody who's not feeling great. My diet was the standard American diet. You know, I grew up across the street from a dairy farm, and I started eating fast food and junk food pretty young. And then when I became a performer, my diet was based on what I should eat to stay slim and, you know, look good on camera. And I never really knew how to eat or take care of myself. And then once I was diagnosed, I started to really look into an anti-inflammatory approach. Reducing inflammation. Inflammation is the root cause of most chronic diseases. So I stripped out the dairy, I stripped out the animal products, I started making green juices and healthy smoothies and really eating a lot of vegetables, removing the processed foods, you know, the fake foods, packaged foods. And slowly over time, I also learned how to like this new way of living and you know, really enjoy it, make it delicious, make it palatable to me. Anyway, slowly over time, really the proof was in my blood work.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that when you first started, was that something that really encouraged you? Is when you just started doing that?
I see it in the blood work, I'd see sometimes in healthy scans, and then also, you know, your body tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah. How did your doctors take this?
Well, they were happy because, you know, they weren't going to give me any treatment. You know,
there was none?
No, there isn't any. So I have cancer in my liver and both of my lungs, and there's no surgery, there's no chemo or radiation. So this wasn't my way of saying I'm going to be some brave pioneer and eschew Western medicine. I think there's many wonderful things about Western medicine. I actually teach people to find the best team for you, but also include functional medicine practitioners, people who will look at the root cause of your illness as opposed to just the symptoms. And so they were happy that I was willing to take care of myself. So, you know.
Did you think that they possibly took some of the elements of what you were doing and applying them to maybe some of the other patients to just round out part of their healing?
Maybe. My oncologist is very supportive. He's always like, are you still great? I don't know, whatever you're doing, keep doing. What are you doing?
What's
I
that
gotta
green
do some
stuff?
of that. Yeah. You know, I think it takes a lot to move the needle sometimes in big institutions, but the more you see patients feeling better and patients really not only feeling better but feeling empowered, because you know, food is one thing, but if you feel like crap, you feel like garbage, you have garbage thoughts, you don't feel worthy or good enough, you feel rageful, sad, depressed, and you're overcome by those emotions, it's very difficult to raise your energy and raise your immunity. So that empowerment piece, I think, was a big thing that my doctors and also my community has benefited from.
Yeah. Well, your message is very strong. As I said earlier, I heard you in D.C. last fall. And I was, at first, I overheard some people say, oh, that's the girl who's going to be talking about her cancer. And, well, should we go? Should we not go? Yeah, let's go. But your message was not just about cancer.
Yeah.
Their message was about wellness and preventiveness, which was amazing. And that seems to be the biggest story. So is that what you're embarking on?
Absolutely. You know, it was interesting. When I was on Oprah in 2007, it was me and Randy Pausch who wrote the last lecture. And we shared the episode, the two of us. And it really was about people who were living with terminal illnesses. And Randy, as you know, passed away, and his book became one of the greatest teaching tools that we have. And what I didn't realize after that episode is when people actually started to follow me, follow my blog, follow me on, you know, social media, many of them didn't have cancer, but they said, this girl is fun. She's funny. She's teaching things that we all need to know.
Yeah.
You know, who better to learn it from? And so that's when I realized that I needed to actually open up my audience and not just speak to people who were dealing with an illness. Speak to people who are interested in prevention, because really that's the best possible thing that I can do, is share my message and teach from a place of, you know, I'm a stage 4 cancer thriver, and you can be a thriver without having cancer. Thrive now.
Yeah.
Thrive now.
Why wait?
Why wait
until you get a?
Yeah. Guess what? We're all going to die.
Right.
Life is a terminal condition, so we might as well thrive through it. And the only way to do that is really to not only take care of ourselves, but to deal with what's going on in our lives.
Right. How important is spirituality with you?
It's very important. You know, I don't follow anything specifically. I moved to Woodstock, New York. I moved to the Catskill Mountains, which are like hills compared to your mountains.
It's beautiful. I saw pictures, beautiful place.
Yeah, I moved there because nature is my church. And connecting with myself on a daily basis is, you know, basically the root of my spiritual practice. And I don't think that I would have the wherewithal to go the distance with a chronic disease, and also to get up in front of people without that connection.
Yeah, saying that soul-centeredness that keeps you going.
And we all have it. You know, spiritual practice is just the way we live our lives.
Right.
You know, I feel like there's really no separation. There's no spiritual practice when you're not connected to yourself.
Right.
And then if there's a higher power beyond that you believe in, great.
Yeah, whatever works for you. Exactly. If you had, I'm sure you have a lot of people that have been recently diagnosed or maybe living with a diagnosis of cancer for a long time. What is it that you find that people want to know the most?
Well, there's two things. What do I eat is usually one, and what do I do with all my fear? And so what I first suggest is, you know, when you're making a big transition, especially when people are resistant, because it can be terrifying. Food is comfort. Food reminds you of your family life, your home life. You know, it's connection. It's how we commune. I say just add things. start by adding a green juice, start by adding more vegetables, you know, and then slowly you'll start to eliminate things.
Right.
You know, you'll eliminate too much coffee, you'll eliminate, you know, too much alcohol, or you eliminate it altogether. And really just look at the amount of inflammatory foods that you're eating. So that's a good start for people.
Right.
And then when it comes to dealing with fear, it's like fear is not a fact, it's a feeling. Fear is a feeling. And in this moment, is this feeling real? Is this really happening right now? It's about managing our cortisol levels, bringing us back into our bodies and out of our fight or flight mode. It's biological, it's chemical, and it's in our minds. Yeah. So sometimes there are real things to be afraid of. You know, sometimes when I go into a CAT scan, there's real things to be afraid of.
I was going to ask you, how do you do? Do you have checkups once a year?
Once every other, year and a half now.
Yeah.
And it's a meditative practice.
Yeah.
You know, when I go in there, I know that I'm not alone. I've got myself. And that's what you mentioned earlier, that spiritual practice, that connection to ourselves. We know that no matter what happens, we will not abandon ourselves. No matter what falls down around our life, our marriages, our health, a death in the family, a loss of a job, we will not abandon ourselves, especially in our time of need. So when I go in there, I take a deep breath. I usually go into the bathroom, I look in the mirror, and I say, girl, I got you. I have you. I am with you. And no matter what they say to us, we will get through this together. We're going to make a plan on the other side. And that tends to bring down the fear and sort of like bring up my girl power.
Yeah, pick up by your bootstraps.
Yeah, and I go in there smiling because really there's nothing I can do, so might as well surrender and accept what is, which is I am a cancer patient. This is a part of the process. But also know that I, like you, am incredibly resilient.
Yeah.
You know?
What would you say to your younger self now?
Oh, gosh, I'd probably say don't go out with that gum.
I think we all have that one, right?
That one. Stop eating that stuff and relax. You're headed for a big wake-up call, but it's going to be awesome on the other side of it, through it, during it, even. I think if I could just be kinder to myself and say nicer things to myself when I was a younger girl, then I wouldn't have so much to mop up later. I think unfortunately so many of us, we just feel very insecure.
Yeah.
And that's the piece that is insane and really a waste of our time.
And that's the gift you got out of all of this.
One
amongst
of them.
many, I was going to say many others,
them.
I'm sure.
One of them, for sure.
Well, thank you so much for coming, sweetie, and sharing, your thoughts. We're looking forward to tomorrow.
Me too.
I know.
Me too.
And just thank you for taking the time, because I know it's precious to you.
It's my pleasure.
It's trying to slow down a little bit.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you. Thanks.